At Iowa Public Radio, we connect you to the news, music, information, and ideas that shape your world every day. And the Iowa Public Radio app is your connection everywhere you are. Listen live, read the news, enjoy a podcast or your favorite music. Send us a comment or message. Download the IPR app to stay connected. Search IPR in the Apple or Android App Store. Or download it now at ipr.org/app.
This is Garden Variety, a horticulture podcast from Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. I'm Charity Nebby. Watching fireflies as they light up a soft, warm night is one of the pure joys of summer. As fireflies dwindle and send their last signals of the season, today we're going to find out what all of that flashing is about. We will also wade through some of the contradictory reports we hear about the health of lightning bug populations. Entomologist Zach Shum is an insect diagnostician with the Iowa State University Plant and Insect Diagnostic Clinic. Hello, Zach.
Good morning, Charity.
So, how much do we actually even know about firefly populations?
In the grand scheme of things, not that much. So there are and just to put it in perspective, when we're going outside and seeing fireflies, we're probably only seeing 1 to 3 species, generally speaking. There's only a few species that are really common, but in North America, we have over 120 species, or about 120 different species, and globally, about 2,400 species. So the ones that we actually have a lot of information and knowledge about is very, very small, just a handful of species. So there's a lot that we know about some species, but very little that we know on the grand scheme of things, for sure.
All right. That is incredibly challenging. I mean, we certainly hear a lot of anecdotal evidence, and, I'm 50 years old, so I can certainly tell you that fireflies look a little different in my yard now than they did when I was a little kid.
Sure.
I mean, how valuable is that perspective?
I think it's super valuable. One of the things that got me interested in insect conservation just when I was really young is noticing those population declines. And I think fireflies are they're a really good proxy for having interest in entomology and conservation related things across biodiversity, whether you're talking insects or other wildlife, because we tend to enjoy them. We tend to experience them a little bit more clearly because they have flashing lights and they're kind of interesting. And you can use them kind of as a proxy to, just have some more interest and desire to learn about conservation values, because we can see population ebbs and flows a little bit more easily just because they're so showy and they have blinking lights on them, which is just weird and fascinating.
Right. We absolutely love them, of course. And they're one of those, they're not charismatic megafauna. Maybe they're charismatic microfauna.
Sure.
So, Zach, what do we need to learn about fireflies so we can even understand what's going on?
Yeah, and one of the things that I say about insects frequently is that in order to conserve species, we actually need to know what's out there, and we need to know what is happening with these different species population levels moving through time. And as I mentioned earlier, there's only, certain species that we tend to see pretty commonly, but there's only a handful of these species that we actually have a really good assessment of population values over time. Some of that comes from citizen science, some of that comes from actual studies that are just being run by researchers. But we need to learn more about what these other species are doing in regards to their populations over time and space. And this is one of the things that I find it's really, I don't want to use the word impossible, but really challenging, because there's not enough time, money, effort, or personnel to actually go out there and survey, scout, determine population trends of all these 2,400 species of fireflies that are out there. So, if in a perfect world, we would have enough people and time and money to do this, but realistically, we'll probably never have the data necessary on all these species that are out there. But certainly we can use data from other species to have a general idea of what's happening to firefly species, generally speaking, globally.
How do you feel about the future of fireflies?
Yeah, one of the things that I say to individuals often is, we've had some reports early this season, or I think there were some social media posts going around of, we could be the last generation to see fireflies. And whenever I read things like that, it kind of stops me for a second, because realistically, that's probably untrue, at least in the grand scheme of things. There are certainly species out there that are critically endangered. There are some that are vulnerable, threatened to some extent with extinction. And that's true. And those trends are likely to continue. as we tend to lose habitat. So habitat loss is the primary cause of species and biodiversity loss. But for all species of fireflies to go extinct globally, like it's a really big stretch and probably very unrealistic. There's probably some species that do better in modified habitats, but certainly we don't have really good data on that as well. At least I don't personally. So it depends, but the odds of all firefly species going extinct is a little bit of a far-fetched idea at this point.
What can individuals do, though? I mean, so we're never going to really fully know what's going on with firefly populations.
Sure.
Obviously, people can participate in citizen science. That's gotten so much easier with our smartphones and some really cool apps like iNaturalist. But can we do something in our yards to support firefly habitat?
Of course, yeah, and this really goes back to what all wildlife needs: food, water, and shelter. If they have more access to food, more access to water, more access to shelter, or more of those resources, they are going to do a little bit better. So because of the uniqueness of fireflies, where they have this bioluminescence and they use their blinking lights to attract mates, some firefly species don't use blinking lights at all. They don't have that feature, so they just communicate with pheromones. But I digress. You can turn off lights at night to limit distractions or to limit things that are going to stop them from seeing one another. We often encourage people to put water features in their landscape. So they really prefer those moist, wet, damp landscapes like wetlands. So any moisture you can add to your landscape. You can let leaf litter and logs and decaying vegetative matter accumulate in your landscape a little bit more, because that's those locations where these things are hanging out and reproducing and growing. Limiting pesticide use, lawn chemicals is another really big one. And as you mentioned earlier, Charity, documenting sightings in things like iNaturalist or Firefly Atlas can also be used by scientists to help track populations over time. This is one of those unique situations where individuals can just help with the conservation efforts by reporting sightings. So one of the main things, too, that I like to recommend is one of the best things that we can do for wildlife and biodiversity in general is to link habitats together, or essentially create habitat corridors, where if we have different areas of habitat that are connected and linked together by more habitat, and you can create passageways between different habitats, you can then hopefully help those populations recover as well.
We have just a few minutes left to talk about fireflies, and I want to ask some of those questions that we all want to know the answers to, especially when we're kids, I think. How do they glow, Zach?
Yeah, really interesting. So fireflies are essentially making a chemical reaction in their bodies in order to make that light happen. So they mix two chemicals, primarily luciferin and luciferase. I don't really even know the science behind those two chemicals, but that they're mixing those two together, and they're essentially including some energy into that in the form of ATP, and then they're putting oxygen into that mix as well. And what I find really interesting about fireflies is they can regulate how much oxygen and when they're releasing oxygen into that reaction. And that's how the fireflies can choose, so to speak, what their flash pattern is going to be. So different species have different flash patterns. Species X can, release a certain amount of oxygen that is specific to that particular species of firefly, and that's how they can find different members of their own species.
Yeah, I've read a lot this year in social media posts about synchronized fireflies that flash at the same time. They are not the fireflies that live in Iowa. What are they trying to communicate with the flashing?
So with flashing, fireflies are generally speaking trying to find mates. In most species, in most situations, they're using that flash pattern to locate another member of their same species for mating. That being said, there's some really cool caveats to that. There are a couple of species, one in particular, that will actually mimic the flash pattern of another species, and that other species individual will find it thinking that it could be a mate, and then the one that emitted that flash pattern is just going to eat it instead of mating with it, because it's a member of a different species and just attracted that other one to mimic its flash pattern to attract it so that it could be consumed, which is really cool. So they're kind of brutal out there.
I was going to say, cool. All right.
Cool for us, not cool for them.
Fascinating. Let's go with fascinating for sure.
Yeah.
So can you tell if a firefly is male or female by their flash pattern?
Oh, that is a good question. This might be getting into the realm of me not knowing enough about fireflies, because I am not a firefly expert. Someone listening probably right now is like, well, how does he not know that? He's an entomologist. I actually don't know the answer to that question.
What? You don't know everything about all of the insects on the planet?
No, it's so hard. Yeah, I don't. Not yet. We'll see.
Right. So obviously, we're seeing the fireflies flash during their mating season. They're making more fireflies. What happens to them after mating season? When they stop flashing, where are the fireflies?
Sure. So, all insects are going to have some mechanism for surviving, at least in temperate regions like Iowa, where we have pretty cold winters, some mechanisms of surviving the winter. Some insects migrate, right? So, the monarch is the stereotypical observational one that we see here in Iowa. But other insects are just overwintering somewhere in the region. A lot of them are overwintering in the soil as some sort of life stage. Some insects overwinter as the adult stage. Some overwinter in the egg stage. A larval stage. All different insects are going to have some mechanism for surviving the winter. So fireflies don't migrate. They are just overwintering somewhere, particularly, in leaf litter, in soil, and then they'll just emerge next year and repeat the process again.
All right. And so that returns to the creating habitat is not just about planting things. It's about also leaving things in the environment, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's, mentioning earlier that leaving logs and leaf litter in the fall until like really, really late fall can be helpful for a lot of insect overwintering. And fireflies are no exception there. So any leaf litter or decaying logs, places where they can hide and overwinter are going to be super helpful for having populations that can make it into the following season.
It is a time-honored tradition for children to chase and catch fireflies. Do you have any advice for how to do that in a way that's not damaging to our fireflies?
Sure. Yeah. I don't think that's super challenging. I think if you're just gentle with your hands, you can just collect them with your hands. I still do that to this day, where I just try to grab and not squeeze. Yeah. That works most of the time.
Scoop underneath and they'll lay on your hand.
Scoop underneath. Yeah. And so, but I think it is really cool to gently close your hand and then you can just see them flashing from within your hand, which is really cool. When I was young, I just had a net. I just carried my net around everywhere and I would just put them in a jar and then release them an hour later, So yeah, the goal is just to be gentle. Fireflies are more of a soft-bodied insect. They don't have a super hard exoskeleton like some other beetles have. So just be gentle with them. You can scoop method them. You can just grab them gently off of plants. As long as you're gentle, they'll be okay.
All right. So just be gentle and enjoy. Zach Shum is an entomologist. He is an insect diagnostician with the Iowa State University Plant and Insect Diagnostic Clinic. For more gardening information and tips, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Find out more at iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. Garden Variety is a production of Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension. It's produced by me, Erin Stile, Caitlin Troutman, and the Iowa Public Radio talk show team. For more garden goodness, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Just go to iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. See you next time.